I felt all the tutors around me and teachers and carers, they weren't showing emotions to me that they physically cared about me. So I was misbehaving in class, throwing a chair or shouting at a teacher.
I had a bad morning in my home placement. I had a meltdown and I wasn't ready to go into the classroom, but they sent me anyways, and I did poorly on an exam I had that day.
Misunderstood, forgotten, unseen and unheard. These are just some of the feelings many children around the UK and around the world feel when dealing with trauma and the lack of support for them within schools.
My name is Luke Rogers and I'm here in Middlesbrough today to understand what it means to be attachment aware and trauma informed. As a young person that was brought into care at the age of 10 years old, and I've now spent the last 11 years working in social care, I understand what it's like both personally and professionally to experience these attachment disruptions and trauma. Whether that's young people being brought up in difficult family environments, whether young people that experience abuse, neglect or trauma, it might affect their ability to learn.
Proclaim is a project that works with schools to address the needs of these vulnerable children through training, supervision and support. The programme was built around attachment-aware and trauma-informed practices using science and evidence-based research. I'm on my way to speak to some of their experts who can tell me more.
Being attachment-aware, trauma-informed means that you recognise that presenting behaviours that we have in our schools and our wider communities might be a response to, past or current traumatic experiences that somebody's going through.
In reality, everyone suffered trauma, be a bereavement, it could be a move of house, it could be even the cost of living crisis at the moment. That is all trauma. So by using Proclaim, we're helping every child, because every child will have had some form of trauma in their life, whether it's known or not.
I know that Proclaim's doing a lot of work around providing teachers a language to be able to communicate what it actually is that children are going through. Could you share a little bit more with me about the universal language that Proclaim is communicating?
Proclaim language learns about what might have led to a behaviour in a bid to understand that. Rather than somebody walking through the door and asking, where have you been? A simple change to that is everything okay? Can just change the way that child might respond to you.
And it is about consistency. So what we want from Proclaim is that a child will get the same or similar response from every adult within school.
Nothing's going to be unpredictable when everyone's using the same language, and then they feel safe, then they can learn.
Could you explain to me what is the evidence base that backs the Proclaim project?
Well, we just know a bit more about how the brain works. So we know that playful, soft language, it sparks all the right areas of the brain. If it's that harsher toned or even a look, the brain goes, especially if a child has, experienced trauma or is in trauma because of their present day situation, everything just shuts down.
We know that Dan Hughes has put together very much that PACE model that we're using, and we've looked at all of the research that's come from the Timson project. So that was a project that looked at being attachment-aware, trauma-informed in schools. Their aims were to think about increasing attendance, reducing exclusions.
So when we exclude children from school, that's an attachment need that's been taken away. We need a process like Proclaim to sort of re-establish those connections. And neuroscience is very interesting because once upon a time we just thought, once connections died, they died. And it's important to know that the children can recover and heal from trauma. And if we get there early, then the benefit and outcomes will be immense.
Now that I've spoken to psychologists and I understand more about the research and science, I'm really interested to go and speak to someone who currently works in an education setting and has personal experience of care themselves.
Hi, Carell.
Hi, Luke.
Tell me about some of the system failures that you see within school when it comes to supporting young people that have experienced trauma and sort of attachment challenges.
I think from my own personal lived experiences, it would be around just the expectation, but equally the lack of expectation. Let's say, for instance, my experience of being a looked after child. on one hand, the expectation from the adults around me, the local authority, etc., to make sure I was in education, to make sure I achieved even at the bare minimum. But equally, on the other hand, of the professionals, the expectation wasn't high because she's just looked after. And they're internalizing a different view of themselves and the world around them. And so it's that messaging and it's that language that I think, you know, a project like Proclaim can really help to change in terms of how we speak to and how we speak about.
Does this come up in teacher training?
Because a lot of my teacher training was around classroom management, okay, behaviour management. How do you get the information you've created, you've designed, delivered to a wide range of audiences? For a lot of children who have experienced childhood trauma, their learning is very different. And once we understand that and have that grounding knowledge, it helps us then in how we deliver and how we teach. I feel as though the idea, the vision for Proclaim is needed. Okay, it's been long overdue almost, right? It's about recognising that the landscape and the experiences of our children and young people have dramatically changed, okay? And that is being seen a lot quicker in the classroom than in any other space. And so for our educators to be attachment aware and trauma informed, they're more likely to develop and implement policies that ensure that children remain in education, that they achieve in education, and ultimately that they progress in education. And I think that's really, really key.
It was great to chat with Corelle and hear her experiences when it comes to some of the teaching aspects that Proclaim addresses. On average, across the country, 15% of students have had support from a social worker. In Middlesbrough, this increases to 20%, which is the equivalent of 1 in every 5 children. I left our call eager to hear from young people in Middlesbrough about their experiences and if it echoes what I've heard so far. So I'm on my way to chat with Tia, a care-experienced young person working on the Proclaim project.
Do you think young people know what their emotions are?
No, and that's why we need to be trained to be able to support them to understand it themselves. I am an example of, because I've had the right support and because I've had adults help me, I've been able to look back and be like, actually, they were there to support me, not to cause me further harm. The most important part for a young person is to feel safe. We don't know what's best for that young person more than that young person.
Would I be right in saying that Proclaim and the training that Proclaim provides helps you see things from lots of different perspectives?
Yeah, and sometimes you still might not understand it, but that's why, even after training, we're still going to be there to support. The teachers will learn how to use the correct language, so they will start understanding a child's behaviour, not shout at them or punish them for their behaviour. I was blaming everybody else for my anger, and we looked back on one of my reports. One time I said, why should I be nice when no one's ever been nice to me? We need to look back at what actually the young person's triggers are, what the young person needs and would like, because it's their voice. We need to all work together to be able to support that child, and if we can make a difference to one child, we can make a difference to all of them.
Hearing from these young people, it's clear a change is needed. I want to know the real impact Proclaim's had in schools, so I'm travelling to chat with Lucy Gowland, the Deputy Head and Designated Safeguard Lead at Acklam Grange, the very first school that adopted Proclaim, to hear how their experiences have been.
So Proclaim is an approach that is built on what we already do here at Acklam Grange, and I think Proclaim has just given us some tools really to upskill our staff and to make them more aware of what trauma-informed practice is all about. I think it's just more of the science behind it, the neuroscience, looking at that research and why it works. I think we've all been empowered with that knowledge, and I think that gets buy-in from staff as well. Teachers are natural geeks and want to learn, and everybody did buy-in with significant enthusiasm, I must say. Probably more enthusiasm than I've seen in terms of anything we've launched in school. The point at which kind of Proclaim was brought to us was just before the first kind of lockdown. What more of an ideal time could you be to be approached with a project that is based on, trauma-informed practice? We did see throughout COVID, those students that were struggling beforehand significantly struggled on the return. And we had basically our Proclaim model. And I think that just that approach of making sure that everybody feels cared for, wanted, that was a real key for us.
Brilliant. Why should every school in Middlesbrough do Proclaim?
First of all, it's free. Why would we not have a free opportunity taken up? We absolutely need this in Middlesbrough. We're all dealing with the same level of complexity and the same levels of vulnerability. Staff buy into it, students see the benefit, and it allows us to provide the best possible start in life for our young people and the best possible life chances.
Another Middlesbrough school who saw Proclaim as a no-brainer was Jane and Pippa at Beverley School, an all-age specialist school for students with a diagnosis of autism and associated learning needs.
So how does Proclaim work in a specialist school environment?
We are feeling that the physiological presentation of having autism may be similar to what the brain goes through with traumatic events.
A diagnosis of autism is a trauma in itself, isn't it? It's a trauma for that child with any disability and then for that family.
So obviously trying to communicate while having autism but not realising you have it will create a frustration which is likened to the trauma that you might experience in childhood or having an adverse childhood experience. That's the argument that you're making.
Tentatively making.
Yes,
We're not like neuroscientists here. We've just started.
Neuroscientists basically done it. Actually.
We've just had good conversations about it because the presentation is very, very similar. Yeah, so that's been a great link, that there isn't this separate idea of what a trauma and attachment classroom would look like and what an autism-friendly classroom looks like. Actually, all these strategies work for everybody. And it's about that relationships, calm environment, structure, routine, simple language. All of that's been a real light bulb moment for me and Jane.
Because it's been for 2 terms now you've been doing Proclaim. What's your journey looked like so far?
We've just done lots of CPD and that's been fantastic. We've done whole school training. The majority of our staff have done the additional online training as well. And I think moving forward it will be further supporting our parents. It's been interesting because I do an awful lot of the meetings with parents as well. And I think parents are starting to say, oh, actually, oh, right, so maybe I wasn't brilliant this morning when they just wouldn't get dressed for me and maybe I got a bit short-tempered and the impact. So it's just bringing it into conversations, a change of language with our staff, with our students, and more importantly, with our parents. And that's really quite exciting.
So Proclaim puts 10 schools into a cohort to have network meetings. How have you found attending those meetings?
It's heartwarming to hear of other schools on this journey. It gives you hope, and that hope's energetic and that's inspiring, and that's what a network meeting should make you feel. And it's been a very important part of us as a team, for us together, for us just to have a place to talk, and it's allowing you to develop relationships in that way with that support.
And you know that this is your time to reflect and talk and share, which is great.
What would you say to a governor to convince them to do Proclaim?
Most people that I know want to become governors because they want to help and support a school, and they want to create a community of care and compassion for their local area. And it's evidence-based research. So my question would be, why wouldn't you want to do Proclaim? Not why would you want to, why wouldn't you?
After chatting with the schools, I feel I now have a full understanding of the impact of Proclaim. Before I end my journey through Middlesbrough, I want to feed back what I've heard to Victoria Banks, Middlesbrough's virtual school head and co-designer of Proclaim, and Rob Brown, the Director of Education in Middlesbrough. So lots of schools have been saying they feel that Proclaim's given them a language
to actually be able to understand what is behind behaviour. And one of the other great things that I've heard is that it doesn't actually require more time. Not only is it helping the teacher-student relationship, but for young people that might be having struggles at home, it's helping the parent and child relationship too.
Definitely. The symbiosis between the home learning environment and the school is critical. And that leads to fewer permanent exclusions, fewer disruption within the classroom, a better learning environment, which is why the schools are so enthusiastic for this and why it's going to grow.
Proclaim's not about attach and wear trauma-informed schools, it's about attach and wear trauma-informed community. It's about the whole community and the future of Middlesbrough. It's a community that's full of passion, and it is a beautiful place to live and to work. But we can't deny there's high deprivation. Unfortunately, where there's poverty, quite often there's adverse childhood experiences, and we believe that's not good enough for our children, and we should do everything we can to level the playing field. If we're talking about levelling up, Proclaim supporting that.
What would you say to head teachers or other people that would think that relationships aren't that important in school?
When we're looking at a behaviourist approach, what's the difference between equality and equity? They're two very different things. So if we take, for example, two young people come into school, both have forgotten their tie, both get an internal inclusion, and they've got to spend that day reflecting on why they forgot their tie. For Kelly, who's come in without her tie, she's come from a home where mum and dad are there, and she just wasn't prepared. Perhaps Jack, his parents might have substance misuse issues. He didn't spend the night at home because his parents had an argument, so he went round his friend's house. So Jack hasn't got his tie. So when he comes into school, he's treated exactly the same for things that were beyond his control. Is that fair? Should we be applying the same draconian approach in all circumstances, irrespective of background or understanding? Or do we just give Jack a tie when he comes in?
What would you be saying, Rob, to another local authority that was thinking about Proclaim, and specifically what would you be saying to them about the benefits of it?
So in a nutshell, I would say look at the outcomes. It's keeping children in school, it's keeping them learning, because an inability to meet the child's need results in significant cost. It's a cost to the young person in terms of their learning journey, and it's a cost to the local authority, it's a cost to the school. So the appropriate intervention at the right time to meet that need is better for everyone. And I think that's why Proclaim works.
One of the best things that I have heard is within our network meetings, one of the schools are kind of talking, going, do you know what, before we would have gone straight to a suspension or an after-school detention. She went, now we're all kind of getting together and we're saying, okay, but what do we do in Proclaim? How will we do this in a Proclaim way? And at that point, I was like, yes, that's exactly what this is. We're only 2 terms in, but we did a little bit of data run. And it was for the looked after children cohort, those who are more susceptible to be suspended. And what we found is if you were in a Proclaim school, you were 2/3 less likely to be suspended than if you were in any other school. So what we know is it's working for our children and it's working for our schools.
What is the one thing that you would want people to take away who are watching this documentary?
Don't be fearful of trying to understand relationships. You can transform someone's life just by approaching the situation slightly differently.
One thing anybody could do is just smile. It's one of the most welcoming things you can do, and anybody can do that. You know, if they're late for school, they've already had a stressful morning, and they're coming through those doors and they're really anxious and they're really nervous, to smile at a student and to make them feel welcomed just changes their whole day.
I came away from my meeting with Victoria and Rob smiling. I think inherently we all want a way to support young people who are struggling, and with Proclaim we get to be reassured that this relationship-based humanistic approach works. What Proclaim is providing is a space for you to go and support young people that leads to better outcomes, reduces exclusions, and empowers not only school staff, governors and parents, but also supports the wider community. This is only the beginning of Proclaim's journey, with more schools now having the opportunity to sign up and join this movement. I can only imagine the impact this will have in Middlesbrough and beyond.